All right, everybody. So I am really happy to be able to be here today and talk with you about ACEs education in home visiting. And as we described earlier, I've been a champion for ACEs since the very first time I heard Dr. Felitti speak, which was in 2013. And during his presentation, the first thought that came to me was, oh my, he's talking about my clients. These are my field nursing clients. And then the second thing that came to me was, holy crap, he's talking about me. So I was kind of on fire about ACEs. And in 2016 and 17, Sonoma County did a training with Dr. Anda to train people to basically become ACEs master trainers. So I did that training as well. And since then, I've been doing presentations whenever possible for anyone who's interested. So thanks in a great part to our new California Surgeon General. I guess she's not that new, but she's still new to me, Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris. Since the 2013 and 2017, ACEs science and education has really grown in California. So now it includes Medi-Cal reimbursement for ACEs questionnaires in clinical practice, which is great, and grants from the state to train physicians to use ACEs questionnaires, and most recently, grants from the state to create resource and referral networks. I'm really excited that the TIA PHN program is going to continue to use ACEs questionnaires as part of their practice, and that San Francisco, Napa, and Sonoma counties are joining together to promote evidence-based and trauma-informed practice for field nursing, including teaching clients about ACEs and child brain development. I will talk a little about what ACEs are and screening for ACEs. It looks like most of you have heard of ACEs before, so that's really cool. What I really want you to walk away with today is a sense of confidence in talking with clients about the negative impacts of toxic stress and the protective impacts of positive experiences on a developing brain. And I hope you'll also feel comfortable teaching clients about, believe it or not, neuroscience, neurobiology, and epigenetics. Maybe not in those words, though. So we're going to ask you to hold questions until the end, but feel free to put your questions in the chat box so you don't forget. And Julianne's going to be, checking and making sure everything's okay. Also, please do let Julianne know if there's a technical glitch and I'm not noticing it, okay? So thanks to the work of these two curious public health scientists way back in 1998, what began as an obesity research project at Kaiser San Diego has become a consensus of scientific research that demonstrates that cumulative exposure to adversity, especially adversity that's experienced during critical and sensitive periods of brain development, is a root cause of some of the most harmful, persistent, and also expensive health challenges that face our state and our nation. And like I said, California is leading the way in ACEs education, prevention, and treatment by training doctors to screen patients for ACEs and provide Medi-Cal payment for those ACEs screenings. The goal is really to significantly improve health and well-being across the state by identifying children and adults who are at risk, and then creating closed-loop local resource and referral networks so that we can better offer supports including everything from behavioral health, resources to improve the social determinants of health, and also family support and education from home visitors like you all. So these are the categories of adversities that were identified in the original 1998 ACEs study. The study described 3 domains: abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction, and 10 experiences: physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical and emotional neglect, and mental illness, incarceration, intimate partner violence, substance use, and divorce or loss. The study found when these experiences happened prior to 18 years of age during critical brain development, they had a negative effect on future health and well-being. The study's been replicated many times, and data from the research shows that ACEs are highly prevalent. 62% of Californians report experiencing at least one ACE, and 16% have experienced 4 or more. The original study also found that ACEs affect all communities. The original study didn't include experiences like bullying, racial discrimination, and poverty, but subsequent studies have shown that ACEs have a higher prevalence in people who are low income, of color, involved in the justice system, and/or members of the LGBTQ community. So it's important to recognize that social determinants of health other than ACEs are also associated with health risks, and that includes community violence, food and housing insecurity, bullying, and discrimination. As a matter of fact, the PEARLS questionnaire that's currently being used in California in pediatric screening, it includes an ACE screen as a part 1, and then there's a social determinants of health screen as well as a part 2. So the pediatric questionnaires have a total of 17 to 19 questions, depending upon the child's age. We have a lot more to learn about the health effects of adversity. However, we do know that the 10 experiences that you see here, the 10 that were described in the original study, are evidence-based risks for future health challenges. So these are the ACEs that were identified in the original study. These are not all of the adverse experiences a person might have had. ACEs aren't necessarily everything, but the knowledge can mean everything. In addition to highlighting the prevalence of ACEs, the original study also showed the risk for adverse health outcomes increased with the number of ACEs that were experienced. This graph shows how the risk of depression increases for both men and women in kind of a dose response fashion. As the ACE score goes up, the risk goes up. 60% of women who've experienced 4 or more ACEs experience depression. And depression is the leading cause of disability in developed countries, including the United States. One of the strongest relationships that was seen in the original ACE study is between ACEs, ACE score, and the risk of suicide attempts. People with an ACE score of 4 have almost 20 times the risk of suicide attempts as people with an ACE score of 0. Very dramatic. So this slide is just to give you an idea of population attributable risk. This slide is from 2015, so I feel it's a little old, but I just wanted to give you an idea in something that you could actually see what the population attributable risk of ACEs is. But I also provided a link to the ACEs Aware website to a page that shows population attributable risk for many current health issues, so you can get some more information. But in 2015, each of these little slices of this pie represent behavioral health challenges. And the oil slick in the middle are the percentage of ACEs believed at that time to be responsible for that outcome. So suicide attempts, 67% related to ACEs. Serious and persistent mental illness, 69%. Alcoholism, 65%. Anxiety, 56%. Adult incarceration, 61%. Life dissatisfaction, 67%. Some pretty amazing numbers. So you can really see how this would be very expensive for a community experiencing high levels of ACEs, or even any ACEs at all. So let's look at ACEs a little bit more, but let's talk about screening for ACEs. There's three important considerations to remember when you're screening for ACEs. First of all, most important, or maybe they're all important, ACEs aren't something you can erase. So your ACE score doesn't lower after treatment. Your ACEs don't actually go away. An ACE score should never be linked to being eligible or ineligible for a service. You really can't say that a person with a score of 8 will need these services and someone with a score of 2 will need those services. And finally, an ACE score, it's a risk factor. It's not a diagnosis, it's a risk factor. Like my father's diabetes is a risk factor for diabetes for me, but it doesn't mean that I have or I'll even develop diabetes. ACEs can't always be avoided. So if you think about divorce, I mean, sometimes that's a really good thing. Death happens and behavioral health challenges sometimes can't be avoided. But ACEs in childhood are buffered by a safe, stable, and nurturing environment. We all have resiliencies, and there's always more we can do to lower the health risks associated with ACEs, both during childhood and as adults. An important part of screening is teaching about those resiliencies, including the importance of positive experiences and what a safe, stable, and nurturing environment looks like. So ACEs are indeed associated with poor health outcomes across the spectrum. The more ACEs, the more likely there are poor health outcomes. And ACEs might lead to poor health behaviors. However, studies show that poor health outcomes are actually independent of poor health behaviors. And finally, ACEs in childhood are buffered by a safe, stable, and nurturing environment. I'm going to say it again. A safe, stable, and nurturing environment helps to build resiliency. So how do we foster resilience? Some of the capabilities that can be difficult for people who've been affected by ACEs includes emotion regulation, self-efficacy, and self-esteem. But you can actually build on those strengths by asking, what are the client's core gifts? Who are their support people? And who makes up their community? When you nurture the healthy development of these protective systems, it affords the most important preparation or inoculation for overcoming potential threats and adversities in human development. Similarly, damage or destruction of these systems has dire consequences for the positive adaptive capacity of individuals. These are really our three core protective systems. So screening for ACEs in a clinical setting helps to inform patient treatment, and it also encourages the use of trauma-informed care in the clinics, in the pediatric offices, and in the doctor's office. But screening for ACEs during a home visit, it means you're reaching two generations at the same time. You're actually helping caregivers who were previously exposed to ACEs to improve their own resiliency and well-being. And you're building their understanding and skills regarding how they can have a positive influence on the health and well-being of their children, regardless of their circumstances. The most important thing about screening for ACEs during a home visit is that it opens the door for conversation. Conversation about wellness, conversation about child development, conversation about self-care, and conversation about resiliency. Even just allowing someone to tell their story can actually be a healing experience all by itself. In the words of Maya Angelou, there is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside you. It really isn't about the questionnaire, it's about the conversation. So this is the ACEs questionnaire from ACEs Aware, the California State ACEs training website. It might look a little bit different to you than ones you might have seen or used in the past. It's the de-identified questionnaire. And field nurses used to advise clients that they could just check the box. You know, there was a box next to each of the items. So they could either check the box next to the item or just provide the total number of ACEs if that's what they wanted to do. And of course, not provide the number at all if that's what they preferred. But with this questionnaire, the client is only asked to provide the total number of ACEs if they wish to share. And many people have advised researchers that they actually prefer this model. And I hope you can see this well enough to read each of these items. I'd really like you to look at it, look it over, look at all those questions, and answer for yourself. I don't have any ACEs, or I do have some ACEs. And I'm going to give you just a minute to do that. Okay. So if you said yes, I have experienced some of these things before my 18th birthday, do you believe that these experiences might have affected your health? Maybe not really, maybe really not at all, or not much, maybe some, maybe, or maybe a lot. In the original ACEs study, 12.4% of the respondents reported that they'd experienced 4 or more ACEs. Among California adults, 16.7% report experiencing 4 or more ACEs. In Sonoma County, that number is 21.6% who've experienced 4 or more ACEs. Among the Sonoma County field nursing clients in 2019, 53% reported having experienced 4 or more ACEs before their 18th birthday. And in 2017, I did a training for Sonoma County home visitors. And during that training, we did the ACEs questionnaires, and 67% of the home visitors at that training reported that they'd experienced 4 or more ACEs. This was like a total aha moment for me. It was such an important thing for me to start to understand resiliency, because my coworkers, educated, well-employed, happy, healthy, in spite of their ACE scores. Wow. ACEs are a risk factor, but they can be amended by resiliency, including positive experiences and supports. So again, ACEs are common. They exist even where you might not expect them. So it's okay to talk to everybody about ACEs. And we all have resiliencies. Our job in screening for ACEs is to help build on those resiliencies. Here she is, Nadine Burke-Harris. So since ACEs are so common, it's really important that we normalize them. Many, many people have experienced ACEs, and it doesn't mean they're broken. Hello. It doesn't necessarily mean they're destined for disease, poverty, and substance use. We all have resiliencies. When working with clients, it's important to look for the strengths the clients already have and build on those. So to quote Nadine Burke-Harris, one of the most important things an adult can do is just recognize what's going on. So getting your own ACE score, that's the first step in the right direction. Number 2 involves figuring out whether you have an overactive stress response, and then understanding what situations activate your stress response. And as Dr. Burke Harris goes on to describe in her book, The Deepest Well, number 3 is understanding the activities that help to heal an overactive stress response and build resiliency. Because caregivers can be the buffer to toxic stress created by ACEs, but only if they can get their own stress response under control, right? We need to put on our own oxygen mask first. Yes, before we can help anyone else. We say this all the time now. Repeat after me. Self-care is not selfish. So the other side of the page here are the 6 areas of healing activities that are part of the toolkit that TIA PHNs use to talk about resiliency with clients. And these are the areas that were identified by Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. First of all, sleep. Very important. Get 8 hours a day. You have an opportunity to talk to people about their habits, what they're doing well, what they maybe need support with. Nutrition. Trying to eat fresh whole foods from the farmer's market or a local store. Being able to access WIC or SNAP. Making sure you drink enough water every day. Exercise. 30 minutes a day. Walking, swimming, and also getting outside. And you have the opportunity to put your own resources in there and to talk about the resources that are available in your community. Relationships. Thinking about relationships, taking time to support your relationships, practicing good, honest, open communication, and where to get help with relationships. Mental health support. Where to get support. Mindfulness, even something as simple as counting to 10 or taking 3 deep breaths before you do anything else when you're upset. So when you look at those 6 things and we go over those 6 things, do you say, oh gosh, yeah, no, I would never do any of those things. I absolutely never, ever do any of those things. Or do you think maybe I do at least one of these things, not very often, but occasionally? Or maybe you say, I do one of these things pretty regularly, like maybe even almost every day, I do at least one of these things. And if you answered that way, if you said, I do one of these things pretty regularly, then you responded the same as most of the Sonoma County field nursing clients. And that is a starting point for building resiliency. That is the starting point. You're already doing this. Cool. What else do you want to do? All right. So before we go any further, there's a little bit of a touchy subject we have to cover. And that is, what about my ACEs? What about my ACEs? Are my ACEs going to affect my ability to tell others about ACEs? Are they going to make me like totally freak out in a home visit? So if we're going to try and normalize ACEs for our clients, we need to normalize ACEs for ourselves. And if we're going to try and create a trauma-informed community, then we need to include our own workplace. Support in all home visiting is really important, whether or not you're talking about ACEs with your clients. Personally, I can't say that I've never freaked out in a home visit, honestly. I've been brought to tears on occasion. Home visits can be filled with landmines. Any home visit can be filled with landmines. But I always knew when I returned to the office, I had lots of places to turn to for support. So what I want you to do, what I want to encourage you to do right now, is to think about your own ACEs. You have some, you have none, you have lots. What effect did your experiences have on your decision to choose this work? Where are you on your journey? Are you on the hero's journey? Or maybe you're an enlightened witness who can understand what other people are going through. Or maybe you're a bodhisattva. You're filled with compassion and the gift of smiles. Just ask yourself, what superpower your experiences, whatever they were in the past, helps you bring to your work? And then I hope you'll also spend time as a team thinking and talking about how you can support each other in doing this work. So let's take just a little brief break before we go any further and just kind of check in. So we talked about a lot, and we looked at our ACEs score, and we looked at what do we bring to this work and why are we doing this work? And oh my God, everybody's got ACEs, holy crap. So just take a deep breath and relax. Just be here for a second. And imagine yourself sitting with your client, or you're talking virtually, and you're going to offer an ACEs questionnaire. How do you feel? What comes up for you? Are you excited? Are you scared? Are you feeling a little tense? Go ahead, unclench, take another deep breath. Or are you happy to be able to share this information maybe? And really looking forward to deepening your relationship with your client. I hope you'll continue to check in regularly regarding how it's going for you offering ACEs questionnaires. And I also hope that you will remember every time to check in with yourself when you plan to offer an ACEs questionnaire on a home visit. Check in first and be kind to yourself. If you feel like today is not a good day for you to talk about ACEs, that's okay. That's totally fine. And if your client doesn't want to talk about ACEs today, that's okay too. There might be another opportunity somewhere else down the road. Thanks for sharing that with me. I'm ready to just take another deep breath and move on. Let's move on to some safe science, shall we? Let's talk about neuroscience, neurobiology, epigenetics, brain science. What do we know? What don't we know? So here's something you can do just to remember this. You can take a piece of paper, whatever's on your desk there, one of your handout pages or something, and turn up the bottom corner like you would to save your page when you're reading a hopefully not library book. Just turn up a little corner. And right in that little upturned corner, known. That's what's known. Known. The rest of the page, that's what we don't yet understand about neurobiology and epigenetics. We have a lot to learn about neuroscience, neurobiology, and epigenetics. And I hope we always remember that we don't know everything. We also don't know exactly what it is that we don't know. And I hope that humility will continue to inform us, especially when we teach clients, and to help us keep an open mind. You know, speaking for myself, I have definitely learned at least as much from my clients' insights and experiences as they may have learned from me. So a couple things we do know is that human brains develop in human relationships and no other way. The interaction with other human beings is a requirement for human brain development. Human brains develop in relationship with human beings, in relationship between human beings. At the absolutely astonishing rate of 1 million new neural connections per second from birth until about age 6, when things plateau until about the teen years, and then there's some pruning that happens. And the most used connections stay and the least used connections go away. When we're born, our brains are only 25 to 30% complete, less than any other mammal on the planet. Brain development isn't complete until about maybe 22 to 23 years, and maybe not even then, because we're learning more all the time. And now we're finding out that even people at my age are making new connections and developing their brains. So most important, human brains develop in relationship with human beings at the astonishing rate of 1 million new connections per second. So how do you teach about neuroscience? There's so much research going on. This little picture on the left there, that's a baby having their brain imaged at the University of Washington while they're learning more about language skills. So as the baby is learning language skills, the researchers are learning language skills. And on the right, that little cap is an EEG measurement of mirror neuron activity during baby play at the University of London. So we're doing a lot of research, and there's a lot of like technical information out there. I certainly do not know how you can get a baby to sit underneath a brain imaging scanner or to wear that little cap for any time at all, but apparently this is happening. And I do usually recommend a video. It's called Newborn Brain Development, and it's from the Harvard Center on the Developing Child. And you do have a link to that on your handout, but I'm just going to tell you about what that video talks about. Basically, brains are built over time from the bottom up. The basic framework of the brain is created through an ongoing process of connections between individual brain cells. And those connections actually do start before birth, and they continue into adulthood. They're called neuroconnections. Neural connections are the links that form between brain cells when we learn something new. The connections kind of remember the skills that we learn. Simple connections and the skills they hold form first. You know, look at any baby, it's smiling, it's using sounds, and then sitting up. And those simple neural connections become more complex circuits and associated skills like walking, using words, and eventually even the higher executive functions that we all hope to get to. In the first few years of life, more than 1 million new neural connections form every single second. You might hear me say that again. So you can kind of use a house metaphor, right? When you provide a safe, stable, and nurturing environment, it gives your baby a platform of neural connections that support further development. So you're actually encouraging the growth and development of those executive functions, memory, mental flexibility, and self-control. When you provide that scaffolding for future development, that includes establishing routines, modeling social behavior, and creating and maintaining supportive and reliable relationships from the very beginning. Just like a house, the brain needs a stable base and scaffolding to support further growth and development. The safe, stable, and nurturing environment actually supports brain development beyond simple skills to complex thought. So how do we build that brain building relationship? One way is serve and return. And again, there's a great video. It's about 5 or 6 minutes. It's one that you might want to watch and you can share with your clients. It's really lively and lovely, and the music is great and the kids are beautiful. And that's again from the Harvard Center on the Developing Child, and the link is in your handout. It's called Serve and Return. And I'm just going to go over the 5 steps with you with these slides. So step 1, notice the serve and share the focus of attention. Is the child looking or pointing at something, making a sound or a facial expression, maybe moving those little arms and legs? That's actually a serve. That's, hey, look at me, here I am. The key is to pay attention to what the child is focused on. Now, obviously, you can't spend all your time doing this, so looking for small opportunities throughout the day while they're getting dressed, waiting in line at the store. Those are great times to really pay attention to those little serves. And why? Because by noticing serves, you learn a lot about children's abilities, their interests, and their needs. And you'll encourage them to explore. And most important, you'll strengthen the bonds between you. Step 2, return the serve. Okay, by supporting and encouraging. You can offer children comfort with a hug and gentle words. You can help them. You can play with them, imagine, or just acknowledge them. You can make a sound or facial expression like saying, I see, or smiling and nodding to let the child know you're noticing the same thing. Or you can pick up an object a child is pointing to and bring it closer. Why? Because supporting and encouraging rewards a child's interests and curiosity. Never getting a return can actually be stressful for a child. If you remember those still face experiments, it's not pretty. When you return a serve, children know that their thoughts and feelings are heard and that they're understood. Step 3, give it a name. When you return a serve by naming what a child is seeing, doing, or feeling, you make important language connections in their brain, even before the child can talk or understand your words. It's important to do this even with newborns, even with infants. You can name anything, a person, a thing, an action, a feeling, or a combination. If a child points to their feet, you can also point to them and say, yeah, those are your feet, yay. And why do you do that? When you name what children are focused on, you help them understand the world around them and know what to expect. Naming also gives children words to use and lets them know you care. Step 4, take turns and wait. Keep the interaction going back and forth. Every time you return a serve, give the child a chance to respond. Taking turns can be quick. It can just go from the child to you and then back to the child, or it can go on for many, many turns. And waiting is crucial because children need time to actually form their response, especially when they're learning so many things at once. When you wait, you help to keep the turns going. And also, taking turns helps children learn self-control and how to get along with others. By waiting, you give children time to develop their own ideas and also build their confidence and their independence. And waiting helps you understand their needs. And 5, practice endings and beginnings. Children signal when they're done or ready to move on to a new activity. They might let go of a toy. They might pick up a new one, they might turn to look at something else, or they might actually walk away. Babies will start to fuss, they'll turn away. Older kids might say, all done. When you share a child's focus, you'll notice when they're ready to end the activity and begin something new. And why would you do this? Because when you can find moments for children to take the lead, you empower them. You support them in exploring their worlds and make more serve and return interactions possible. Simple, right? So look at these pictures again. Have you ever seen a caregiver do any of these things? You know, if you watch any caregiver with their baby, you will probably see serve and return happening. And if you can notice it, you can mention it, you can reaffirm it, and thereby build on the caregiver's strengths. It's really wonderful the way you respond to your baby with positive words. You really let him know that his thoughts and feelings are heard and understood. Did you know that not getting a response can actually be stressful for a baby? Did you know when you share your child's focus like that, you are actually encouraging him to explore and strengthening the bonds between you? These loving and supportive responses to children are positive experiences that help to create the neural connections that lead to future executive function. And Positive experiences also cause the release of oxytocin, which is a biological buffer to the stress response. So executive function, here's another opportunity, a little support for teaching about executive function. What is executive function? It's working memory. It's being able to retain and manipulate distinct pieces of information over a short period of time. It's having mental flexibility, being able to sustain and shift your attention in response to different demands, and also to be able to apply different rules in different settings. And self-control, being able to set priorities and resist the impulsive actions and responses. This handout again comes from the Harvard Center on the Developing Child. It's got a lot of words, but the pictures are good too. So it can be a really useful tool in teaching about executive function. So let's go on to toxic stress. Stress comes in three flavors. Some stress is good. It leads to positive changes in the brain, like learning new tasks and skills. That's positive stress. So it involves brief increases in heart rate, mild elevations in stress hormone levels, and learning something new. Some stress is okay, and it's unavoidable. Everybody has these stress responses. The stress response goes up to signal an unmet need. I think in this case, maybe hunger, and then it goes right back down as the need is met. So stress hormone levels rise and then they return to normal. Tolerable stress, it's serious, but it's a temporary stress response and it's buffered by a supportive relationship. Toxic stress, on the other hand, actually causes negative changes in the brain. To be toxic to the brain, the stress needs to be prolonged and it needs to be untended. Prolonged stress without attention from a caregiver can cause the fight or flight system in the brain to actually grow larger and to become overactive. Infants experiencing toxic stress levels will stop crying, but their cortisol and other stress hormone levels don't return to normal. The set point for the levels of stress hormones remains elevated. Chronic toxic stress can lead to changes in the way the brain grows and develops. Toxic stress is the prolonged activation of stress response systems in the absence of protective relationships. Let's take another look at the impact. So neurodevelopment, it happens really rapidly, 1 million new connections per second, on a pretty specific schedule. Seeing and hearing comes first, then receptive language and speech production, and then leading to higher cognitive function. The base needs to be built before higher functions can be accessed. Cognitive skills build on one another, and they happen at specific times during neurodevelopment. A weak base can't support walls very well, and weak walls can't support a roof very well. Here's another way of looking at the impacts of toxic stress on brain development, and that's to look at the brain. In the cortex, there are actually fewer nerve cell connections, and that can be an issue when the pruning starts. In the amygdala and hippocampus, a hyperactive fight or flight response, an overgrown amygdala and hippocampus. In the brainstem and hypothalamus, disrupted hormone activity that can actually lead to behavioral health challenges. And here I usually like to show you a little hand model of the brain video, and I did give you a link to that, but instead I am going to show you a graphic. So this is the hand model of the brain. So your fingers represent the prefrontal cortex, and your thumb represents the limbic regions of the brain. So if you curl your thumb in and put your fingers over the top, that's what the brain's like. So the limbic system is inside there, but the cerebral cortex, the prefrontal cortex, actually protects you from those responses that your limbic system might want to make happen, right? So what Dr. Siegel says, if you put your thumb in the middle of your palm and then curl your fingers over the top, you'll have a pretty handy model of the brain. I hope you guys laugh. He said his kids can't stand that pun either, but I thought it might remind you of how to make it. I gave you a link to Dr. Siegel's video, as I said, and then I also gave you a link to Dr. Liz Engoff's blog, What to Do in the Moment of a Meltdown. So what happens when your limbic region overtakes your cerebral cortex? Well, here's your limbic region, here's your cerebral cortex. You flip your lid, basically. And when you flip your lid, you can't make good decisions and you can't solve problems. When we're upset, some of us explode. We yell, we hit, we throw things. And some of us implode. We cry, we withdraw, we panic. Those aren't behaviors we want to exhibit. No, probably not in public anyway. And they definitely aren't behaviors we want our kids to have either. But we can't solve the behavior in the moment because the behavior isn't the problem. It's a symptom of a deeper problem. When our prefrontal cortex is in charge, we make good decisions. When our limbic system takes over, well, that's great if you need to ward off a bear, but otherwise, not so good. So Liz Engoff advises sometimes the very act of teaching this to children can help them to avoid the meltdown behavior. I'm getting there, I'm getting there, right? But maybe not go there. When they know what's happening in their brain and that it isn't their fault, they can start to ask for what they need. And she also says that sometimes teaching this to caregivers can be an aha moment of understanding as well. Epigenetics, one of my favorite subjects, but one of the hardest words to say. Epigenetics, epigenetics. And I tend to trip over my tongue during this section, so please forgive me. Epigenetics is what we're born with. Epigenetics are the potentials that exist in our genetic structure. It's actually what we inherit from our ancestors. And now this doesn't look like a brain. It doesn't look like it has anything to do with epigenetics. This is actually a picture of what was called the Iron Curtain. During the Cold War, which was a long time ago, and I'm sorry if you don't know what the Cold War was, please look it up. Electric fences were put up between the Czech and German boundary so that it was impossible to pass. These electric fences had like 3 rows of electric plus barbed wire plus other things. And they were also patrolled by heavily armed guards. In the time that this fence was up, nearly 500 people were killed trying to escape across that barrier. We don't know how many deer died trying to escape across that boundary, but there are still deer in that area. It's a really wild area, open fields and forest. The Iron Curtain itself, it's been gone for well more than 30 years, maybe almost 40 years. But researchers followed the movement of the deer who still live in the Czech-German border via GPS-equipped collars. And they found that even though the area is now forest and open land, there's no barrier, there's no electric fence, the deer still stick to either their Czech or German side of the border. The border still plays a role for the deer. It continues to separate the two populations, even though there's no fence. And what's really remarkable about that is that the average life expectancy of these deer is 15 years. None living now would ever have encountered that electric fence. Epigenetics. crazy. And here's another story. Michael Meaney's mice. So Michael Meaney did a lot of research on epigenetics and generational trauma. And his findings are that the epigenome is affected both by positive and by negative experiences. And I love this quote from him because I think it's cool that a neuroscientist talks this way. The bottom line is that it implies that separation of gene and environment is just a fool's errand completely. These are clearly interactive forces. Michael Meaney's research really highlighted how the epigenome is affected by both positive and negative experiences. What you're born with, it's not your destiny. And this is what he did. So he started with 2 groups of mother mice who exhibited opposite patterns in their maternal behaviors. He found the genetic sequences that related specifically to those behaviors. Group A were very good groomers of their babies, and that's actually normal mouse behavior towards offspring. And group B were very poor groomers. They were sadly neglectful of their offspring. Dr. Meaney found babies from these groups maintained the same attitude towards their own offspring when they grew up and had children. And they had their offspring had the same genetic makeup as their mothers. Babies from the good grooming moms grew up to be good groomers, while babies from poor grooming moms grew up to be poor groomers, and both maintained their genetic makeup. So then, Dr. Meaney switched the babies at birth. He placed the babies from poor grooming moms with good grooming moms and vice versa. Babies from good grooming moms went to poor grooming moms. What happened? When those babies grew up and had babies, they related to their babies the way their adoptive mother related to them. And shocking and interesting, the genetic makeup that they transferred to their babies, it matched their behaviors. Epigenetics. It isn't all nurture or all nature. It's both. Chemical markers do come pre-installed. We're born with them. But our experiences after birth rearrange those markers. They switch those genes on and off. The epigenome adapts based on experiences, both positive and negative, during early brain development, and that affects future health, skills, and resilience. And again, a handout from the Center on the Developing Child, lots of words, but some pretty good pictures too, and it can definitely guide a discussion. You know, if you're like me and you're like epigenetics, but if you can tell a story, hey, that's even better. All right, so that was a lot. Let's just take a deep breath. We talked about ACEs, resiliency, screening for ACEs, neuroscience, neurobiology, epigenetics, the ACEs questionnaire, the resilience handout, brain development. How many new neural connections per second? I hope you said 1 million. And serve and return, and executive function, Dr. Siegel's hand model of the brain, Liz Engoff's meltdown blog, Czech and German deer, Michael Meaney's mice. Wow. Feel free to use any of these tools as a springboard to get you started. And please remember to start where your client is. Teach your clients according to their interests and their needs. But also, and most important, please feel free to teach these subjects in ways that make you comfortable. Be yourself, because that is who is going to reach your clients the best.